In this video, we dive into chapter 13, which is our last full chapter of the semester. And so during class this semester, I've talked about money, inflation, banking, bonds, these types of things. And I've always hinted that, we're really going to dive into this in chapter 13. Well, now we are finally diving into it. So chapter 13 is all about money and banking, okay? So again, chapter 13, that's what we're diving into. And we're going to go through a bunch of different topics that relate to money and banking, okay? So in this first video, we're going to talk about where money comes from and then the properties of money, okay? And then subsequent videos, we'll talk about how we measure modern money. We'll talk about banking, the Fed, and how the Fed controls the money supply, okay? So in this first video, we're just going to focus on the two key points, the first 2 points here as we talk about money. Okay, so, kids ask, where do babies come from? Well, economists ask, where does money come from? Right? And I should have asked that or made that crack smoother as I'm trying to switch pens real quick, real sly. Yep. Okay, let's switch that over here and let's get back to this pen, right? So, a lot of times people think, well, money is printed by government, so money comes from government, right? But historically, actually, that's not how money comes about, right? Yes, today governments generally print money, but governments took over the printing of money, right? Money basically is really what we call an evolutionary process, okay? And so money evolved over time out of our desire to exchange one thing for another, okay? So we know that at a fundamental level, you can have a barter economy. That is an economy with no money, and you're just exchanging goods for goods, right? And what happened is that people very quickly realized that this is not terribly practical, right? And very quickly, even in primitive societies, very, very early human societies, different types of money evolved and began to be used, right? So money kind of evolves out of our desire to exchange, and money just makes exchange of goods and services easier, right? I don't have to exchange my cow for your chickens, right? You can buy my cow and use that money, and I give you the money, and you use that money to buy whatever the heck you want, right? So that's basically how money came about, right? Originally, it was not issued by governments. It just came about naturally through the process of economic exchange, okay? Okay, now, a problem that I kind of hinted at is the reason why, money evolves, right? Because money solves what we call the double incidence of wants problem, okay? So here's the problem, all right? Let's suppose I have a big old box of kiwis. Big fan of kiwis, tasty, good for you, lots of vitamin C, okay? And let's suppose you have a chicken. And I really want chicken for dinner tonight, right? Again, we're supposing I'm not vegan or anything like that, right? But suppose I really want chicken. And so I come over to you with my big old box of kiwis, and I say, yeah, you want to trade? I'll give you all these delicious kiwis if you will give me that chicken, because then I can eat that chicken for dinner tonight, right? Well, we'd be able to have an exchange only if you want kiwis. What if you don't like kiwis? Some people in this world are actually allergic to kiwis, right? So what if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'll give you all these kiwis for that chicken over there, and you say no, right? I'm stuck, right? For barter to work, I have to want what you have, and you have to want what I have, right? So for barter to work, we each, if I can spell each, we each must have an item that the other person wants. Okay. So that's what's required for barter, right? And this is what we call the double incidence of wants problem, right? In order for barter to work, you've got to want what I have, and I've got to want what you have, and we can swap, okay? So money solves this double incidence of wants problem, because now I don't have to have something. Well, I automatically have something you want, which is money, because then you can take that money and go buy whatever the heck you want. Maybe if you don't want kiwis, maybe you want some bananas, right? And so that's how money solves the double incidence of wants problem, okay? All right, so that's kind of how money comes about and evolves, right? But now let's think about, okay, well, if it is an evolutionary process, why do some things evolve as money and others don't, right? Why is it that boxes of kiwis are never used as money, right? And yet coins and dollar bills and cigarettes are actually used as money at different times, right? Why is that the case, right? Well, for money to kind of come about as money, right, a couple things have to be true, okay? One, it has to be accepted by others, right? So if I try to use my stamp collection as money, it's probably going to be hard for that to be used as money, right? Because who the heck wants a stamp collection other than that like 0.05% of the population that loves collecting stamps, right? So it has to be something that's accepted by others. It has to be something that people readily recognize as, yes, I accept this as money, okay? It also has to be something that's durable, right? Because if I sell something and I have some money, right, I'd want it to stick around, right? I don't want that amount of money, that wealth to just evaporate, right? And this is why kiwis are really bad money, right? Because if I use kiwis as money, right, kiwis last like maybe a week if you're lucky, right? So that's not something that is really useful as money because it does not maintain its value over time. It rots and becomes worthless fairly quickly, okay? And the last thing is it generally has to be portable, easy to carry around, right? Basketballs didn't evolve as money. Again, well, sport of basketball didn't exist when Alexa, stop. Boy, stinging home devices. Basketball didn't exist back when money was evolving, but let's just go with the example, right? Basketballs are not a good source of money because, how many basketballs can you fit in your pocket? Well, they're kind of big and bulky and they bounce around a lot. So not really useful to carry around, right? But things like coins and paper bills and shells and rocks and stones, these are the things that have become or evolved into money over time. And it's because they're easy to carry, right? Now, there are a few exceptions to this rule of things being easy to carry, right? At times, livestock was sometimes used as money, but again, it was portable, right? You just tie a rope to your cow or your goat, and then you drag that poor creature into market, and then try to sell your cow or goat off. So sometimes that would be used as money. So it was portable, just not terribly portable. And we'll talk about in a second the most unusual type of money to ever be used, which actually was large stones, okay? But this helps us to understand why money kind of has the form it does, right? Because it has to be easy to carry around, it has to maintain value over time, and things like coins, shells, cigarettes, paper bills, all these things satisfy these properties up here, right? Easy to carry, maintains value, and generally accepted by other people, okay? Okay. So let's look at a couple different historical examples of money. Again, there's a ton. You can just go Google historical examples of money and find all kinds of different coins and bills and so forth. But I'm going to talk about two. One is kind of a standard coin. The other one is I'm going to talk about this example of large stones. Okay, this actually was the dominant currency, the dominant coin, basically during the late 1700s, early 1800s. Okay. And this, if you remember from your pirate movies, this is pieces of 8. Okay, so if you remember, and I spelled pieces so it looks like it's 3 E's in a row, that's a C. There we go. Pieces of 8. So if you remember from, I don't know, what's that book by something Stevenson? Robert Louis Stevenson, right? Treasure Island, I think is what it's called, right? The pirates are always going after pieces of eight and gold doubloons and big old treasure chests full of stuff. But the reason why that was used often as the dominant pirate money is because it was the dominant currency at that time. So pirates were sinking ships and commandeering ships so that they could get this coin, right? It was a Spanish coin. Spain had gone over into the New World, right? They had gone into basically Peru and Mexico and discovered massive deposits of silver. And of course, they had enslaved the local population in these silver mines, and they were just cranking out tons of silver. They were minting them, putting them on ships, and then sailing them back to Spain. And so the pirates said, hey, well, if we just don't have to do all that work, we just intercept these ships in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and we get the silver, right? So this is why pieces of eight was generally the most preferred money of piracy. It's because it was the dominant currency at that time, okay? So again, notice it's easy to carry, it's uniform, right? It has a consistent value, and so all those properties of money that we just talked about are satisfied with this coin. Now, the next example is the most unusual example of money. So, this was money used on the Isle of Yap, okay? And they actually used large stones. So, large, round stones, large stones, okay? Now, the reason why they all have this hole in the middle is because they would quarry them. They would go and kind of like dig them up out of the ground. And because they were so big and heavy, to move them, they basically had to carve a hole in the middle, and then they would stick a big, like, wooden pole through it, and then roll it like a tire. So you'd put one person on one side, one person on the other side, and you would roll this big stone over to your backyard or wherever your hut or village was, and that was your money. That was your stone. And they used it actually almost more like a checkbook system, right? So if I went down the street and went into the local pub or bar and, bought a beer from Bob, then I would say, Bob, to pay for this beer, right, you get 1/8 of my rock. This now belongs to Bob, right? So the way they used this was that it actually was kind of a checkbook system, right? They wouldn't move these stones around that much. But people knew, okay, I own 1/8 of a share in Dr. Connor's rock, and somebody else owns a 4/4 share in Jack's rock, and so on and so forth, okay? So this is probably the most bizarre example for money, okay? Now, these rocks were actually pretty big, right? So this height over here of this rock, this kind of back in the background, this is probably about 5 feet, right? So these were not, so this is just a little shy of 2 meters. That's probably about 1.5, 1.6 meters high. So these were big. It was an odd type of money. The only type that really was not terribly portable. But it worked on this island because it was a small island, closely knit people, and they basically used it as kind of a checking system, as like a checkbook, okay? Okay, now, originally, when money first evolved and came about, it largely was what we call commodity money, okay? That is, it's money that has value, even if it's not used as money, okay? So basically, it has value, even if it's not money. So this is stuff like gold, silver, right? Bronze, okay? So with gold and silver, I can make jewelry, I can make cups, I can make whatever else they used to make with that type of stuff long ago. With bronze, I can make swords and shields and helmets and things to kill people, which apparently they used to do a lot of back then. Right, so commodity money means that it's something that's used as money, but it has value, even if it's not used as money, okay? Now, in modern time, and again, this is not now, but in the recent past, most modern economies actually had what was called a commodity standard, okay? And you still hear people talk about this today sometimes. Usually there's some older, crustier people, but they talk about the U.S. needs to go back to gold, the gold standard. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone was walking around with gold coins in their pocket. What it means is that we used a paper money that was backed by a commodity, that was backed by gold or silver, right? Historically, gold or silver were used as the dominant commodities to back money. U.S. for most of its history has had what's called a bimetallic standard, that is both gold and silver back the currency. But this actually ended in U.S. and in most modern countries today in 1973. Ended in 1973, okay? Okay, so, yeah, so that's basically a commodity money, but you can have commodity money, but then the paper bills represent gold or silver, okay? And that is, you could exchange the paper money for the commodity, that is gold or silver, okay? Now, oh yeah, sorry. The other type, which is what we typically have today, is what we call fiat money, okay? So this is money that has no intrinsic value, okay? That is, if it's not used as money, it's worthless, okay? And oftentimes this is, well, sometimes referred to in the textbook as fiduciary money, fiduciary money, okay? Typically we just call it fiat money, but it has value because the government says so, okay? So the United States, as I mentioned before, switched from a commodity standard to a fiat standard in 1973, okay? So this is basically the US dollar. Right, this is the euro, okay, the Chinese currency, we got the Japanese yen, right? So these are all examples of fiat money. That is, they have value because the government says it does, right? But it's just a piece of paper. You can't take that piece of paper and exchange it for gold or silver or anything like that, right? So fiat money is money that has no intrinsic value, no value if it's not used as money. Commodity money, which is what the world used to use not too long ago, is money that does have some value, even if it isn't money, okay? Things like gold and silver and so forth, right? And now actually, one interesting example, as I go back here, of commodity money on the previous slide, gold, silver, bronze, interestingly in prison, cigarettes. Usually the dominant currency in prisons and POW camps, right? And that's an example of commodity money, right? So you can use the cigarette as money to exchange goods in prison, or you can smoke them, right? It has a use even if it's not money, okay? So that's kind of a interesting example, but it is a very common currency in prisons and in POW camps, okay? Okay, so that's where money comes from. That's the types of money. And we'll stop there. The next video will dive into the properties of money.